Hello, welcome to BBC News. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. Thank you very much for joining us here. We've come on air just a minute or so ahead of the top of the hour because I want to show you these live pictures from London. We are expecting events across the UK to mark the anniversary, the first anniversary of the King and Queen's coronation. And here in central London, in Green Park, we are about to witness a gun salute, a 41 gun salute by the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. Let's watch. And we are watching the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery, a 41 gun royal salute marking the first anniversary of the King's coronation. And we'll leave events there in Green Park in central London, marking the first anniversary of the King's coronation. Right, we're going to head straight to Scotland now, and the SNP leadership race. In the last 3 minutes, nominations to be the next leader of the Scottish National Party have closed. Now, we do know John Swinney, on your screens there, has put his name into the ring. He's the front runner. The big question is whether there are any last-minute opponents. Also, you may remember Humza Yousaf resigned as leader and First Minister of the SNP up in Scotland just last week. So let's go to our reporter, Ben Phillip, who's standing by for us. Ben, so literally just in the last couple of minutes, nominations, that deadline for nominations is closed. What does that mean?
That's right, Lewis. As you say, just in the last few minutes there, nominations, the deadline for SNP leadership nominations has closed in the last few minutes at noon. We are still awaiting an official result from the SNP. But as you say, it's been widely expected that John Swinney would be unopposed in the leadership race to replace Humza Yousaf, who resigned last Monday. We haven't heard about anyone else publicly in the running to stand for SNP leader. There had been a potential late challenger over the weekend in the form of activist Graham McCormick, who said that he'd gathered enough support to enter the contest, but just late last night in a statement he said that he decided not to do so, instead throwing his support behind John Swinney. Of course, if he had decided to enter the contest, it would have triggered a leadership battle, which would have gone on for another 3 weeks towards the end of May, extending the uncertainty at the top of Scottish politics. But if Mr Swinney is indeed unopposed in this contest, as we expect, and secures the top job as SNP leader, we are expecting him to make a victory speech later this afternoon.
Ben, thank you very much for that. We'll be straight back with you when we get confirmation of who are the names, if there are any other names. At the moment, looks like it's just John Swinney, but we don't have that confirmed. So let's take a closer look now. Who is John Swinney? 60 years old, member of the Scottish Parliament for Perthshire North since 2011. Previously represented North Tayside from 1999. Mr Swinney is the former Deputy First Minister and led the party for 4 years in opposition from 2000 to 2004. He has said that if elected, he would seek to govern on a moderate centre-left platform, and said he was confident he would deliver independence through, quote, reasoned conversation. So we will wait to hear any confirmation from the SNP, the party leadership there. For any developments, we will head back to Scotland when we get them. Next to Gaza, Israel's military has been telling people to leave parts of Rafah. Take a look at this. This is a video from the Israeli Defence Forces. It shows Rafah in the south of Gaza, of course, 1 million people there. And as you can see by the arrows, it's telling 100,000 people or so to move to what they call a humanitarian zone. That's in the Al-Mawasi and Khan Yunis areas. The IDF say this is a limited operation. Well, these are the latest pictures we have into us from Rafah. You can see people there have been given these leaflets by the IDF telling them to move. Some have already started leaving. People are packing up their belongings. Many moving, of course, not for the first time, but several times during these events in Gaza. Let's just take a look at the live pictures we have. We have a couple of different live feeds coming in from the region. We are keeping across those pictures. Well, a woman who's been sheltering in Rafah says she doesn't know where she'll go.
This morning we are waking up of an evacuation plan from the Israeli Defense Forces to evacuate the neighborhoods of the eastern area of Rafah. So these areas include Rafah crossing, Kerem Abu Salim crossing, and extended to other parts. People are starting to evacuate this area immediately. It's not far away. It's just 15 minutes away from where I am now. For me, actually, I'm not doing anything for now. I'm so confused. Just to be honest, I have no place to go. This was the last place I know. And actually, if I want to come back to Khan Yunis, there is no place. It's all destroyed. To areas of Al-Mawasi, they are crowded, and I cannot anymore live inside tent. It's so hot, and my health, it's not allowed for me to be in such situation. Regarding Deir al-Balah and Al-Nusayrat, still there is a lot of airstrikes there. I've been there, and it's very dangerous areas.
Our Middle East correspondent Yolande Nell is in Jerusalem, gave us this update.
Already we're seeing people fleeing from this area in the east of Rafah. They're getting into their cars with their belongings, into donkey carts as well, some of them heading to the west, others maybe heeding the Israeli order to go to these two tent cities, Al-Muwasi and Khan Yunis. And the Israeli military is stressing that what is planned here is a limited offensive, that it will happen in a gradual way. Now, Hamas has come out already, though, saying that this is a dangerous escalation that will have consequences. We had understood that a Hamas delegation had left Cairo, where it had been involved in the negotiations with Egyptian mediators on a new ceasefire and hostage release deal, that they were heading to Doha to meet Hamas leaders. Although we had the Israeli Defense Minister coming out in a statement saying he had spoken to the US Defense Secretary and that this military action in Rafah was needed because he said that Hamas was refusing to accept the latest framework for a new deal. So we're having warnings already from the UN that this could have serious consequences. They're very worried about the fact that the Kerem Shalom crossing into southern Gaza, a key crossing point for aid, has now been closed. This happened after Hamas fired rockets, apparently from inside Rafah, towards what they said was an Israeli military base. They actually killed 3 Israeli soldiers and wounded about a dozen others close to that crossing point. And Israel launched retaliatory action last night for those soldiers being killed. So things do seem to be, again, at a very tense moment. And this is really an area where the international community has been so worried because you have more than 1 million displaced Palestinians crammed up next to the Egyptian border, and they've worried that a wider scale ground offensive by Israel, if that was to go ahead, as Israel has threatened, saying it's needed for a total victory over Hamas, then that could lead to high numbers of civilians being killed.
Thanks to Yolande for that. Well, let's speak now to Justin Crump, British Army veteran and Chief Executive of the intelligence company Sibylline. Thank you very much for coming on the programme.
Thank you, Liz.
What's your assessment of this announcement by the IDF with regards to Rafah?
I think the attack into Rafah, to some extent, has always been coming. Israel have actually always said that they would have to go into Rafah at some point. It's obviously been a bone of contention for all the reasons we just heard. 3/4 of the population of the Gaza Strip forced down into that area in awful conditions. And of course, it's therefore become very controversial for Israel to launch this operation, certainly without taking into account the needs of those people. And what we're sort of seeing now is some attempt to take care of those needs with expanded humanitarian areas. But you've heard the skepticism of people about those and if they're actually any safer for them. And of course, I think the scope of this operation, though very much likely to be smaller than the operations we saw when Israel first went into Gaza, are much more targeted. So that's the change we're seeing here at the moment.
So talk to us about what kind of logistics and operations go in here. When you're saying this, it's a smaller operation. How are the areas that are to be evacuated assessed? How is that logistically done? And what kind of assessments are there about the risks here?
I mean, it's tremendously complicated as a military operation. This is about as hard as it gets if you're going to take account of the needs of the civilian population. Again, in that area of Rafah, around 1.5 million people who require sustenance, who require protection from military operations. And in amongst that, the Israelis assess 4 battalions remaining of Hamas in a relatively organized fashion, and of course, many other fighters. So from the Israeli point of view, from a military planning point of view, you've got to work out how to get into that very complicated civilian environment, look for a very limited number of armed people, infrastructure, tunnel systems in which you may or may not have accurate intelligence. Of course, Israel also looking to release any hostages it can find, hoping that the pressure on Hamas in this operation will maybe get some of those hostages moved, give them a chance to capture hostages back. And behind all of that, protect their own forces in a very complicated urban environment.
Yeah.
So again, multiple layers that have to be taken into account to achieve anything.
Justin, thank you very much for that. I'm afraid we've been beaten by the clock, but thank you very much for your analysis. Appreciate your time here on BBC News. We'll have plenty more coverage, of course, with those live feeds from Rafah and the region. Do stay with us here. Now, around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. This is BBC News. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. Next, relations between China and the EU have been a little strained recently, with Brussels uneasy about what it sees as a tacit support by Beijing for Russia's war in Ukraine. So there's extra scrutiny on President Xi Jinping's first visit to Europe for 5 years. First big event for the cameras here, meeting France's President Macron at the Élysée Palace in Paris. They were later joined at the table by the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Now, Ursula von der Leyen said that the European Union counts on China to lean on Russia to end its war on Ukraine. She gave a statement following talks there with President Xi Jinping. She also said she was confident China will de-escalate Russia nuclear threats. Well, our correspondent Hugh Schofield was at the Élysée Palace as Xi Jinping arrived.
The Europeans are, in a way, increasingly aligned with the United States on China. I mean, the United States has accused the Europeans for a long time now of being too soft on China, or not waking up to the reality of the new China. And arguably, that's exactly what the Europeans are doing. And certainly Macron last week, in his speech and in his Economist interview, was quite blatantly concerned about the rise of China and about Europe's naivety and unwillingness to see China, the new China, for what it was. So there is, in a way, the possibility of an American-European alignment here. And I think what President Xi's trying to do is break that, and he's doing it with traditional Chinese diplomatic manners, coming here being very, very fulsome in his praise for France and its historical importance and its grandeur and the role of Charles de Gaulle in recognizing China back in 1964 and all of this. This is the way they talk to the French, flattering France's sense of its own destiny. It talks to Germany in a rather different way. To the Germans, China talks as a purely commercial partner and promises all sorts of commercial deals if it toes the line and for example, blocks the European investigations into dumping practices and so on. So the Chinese interest, quite clearly, that this is the big picture, is to split the Europeans from each other and from Europe, and that's what's going on here.
Let's speak now to Professor Kerry Brown, Director of the Lao China Institute at King's College London. Thank you very much for coming on the programme.
Thank you.
So a fascinating visit this. Lots will be read on what happens, what doesn't happen, what's said, what doesn't happen. Can we start from the Chinese point of view? What are some of the aims and what would be a successful trip in your eyes?
Well, Europe to them is a very, very big partner. I don't think that they're coming here, as your correspondent just said, to make any divisions. I mean, they realise that the European market, technology in Europe, these are still important things for China. And it offers it a counterbalance to the United States, which has had a very tricky relationship with China recently, and therefore that it needs to have some kind of dialogue with Europe on positive things like climate change and combating global warming, things like that, but also on a better trading relationship, and possibly for Macron, kind of getting better access into Europe for services, the European Union did do a deal with China at the end of 2019 for services into China, a kind of investment deal, but that hasn't been ratified because of political issues. So there is a lot of scope for this relationship to develop. It's not all, I think, just about flattery and, kind of trying to create divisions in Europe. I don't think that's really what Xi Jinping is here for.
Interesting. OK, let's, from the other side, from Europe's side, what are the kind of conversations and messages that you think will be the priority?
I think Macron's recent tone is right. Reciprocity. It's got to be a balanced relationship. And I think that Europe has felt it has been a big technology transfer to China over the last 30 to 40 years. And in Germany, huge amounts of technology. And France has also been, a big partner, a big trading partner. And there needs to be more balance. I think Europe, if it's going to be a key economic partner for China, in the future, has got to have a balanced relationship. And I think that's what Europeans want, European Union collectively, but also France. I mean, there's still great deficits in China's favor, apart from Germany. And so, I mean, addressing those imbalances, but also technology, where China is producing incredible amounts of AI and other technology useful to Europe. This is important to have deals where we get access, Europeans get access to that.
Professor Kerry Barron, thank you very much for lending us your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, we're going to head straight to Scotland because John Swinney has become the new leader of the Scottish National Party. He was the only candidate in the race. This was started after Humza Yousaf announced he would stand down as leader. And just in the last few minutes, that result has been confirmed. He will take on the SNP leadership. So if you were with us just 20 minutes or so ago at the top of the programme, top of the hour, 12 o'clock UK time, was basically the closing point for nominations. So no one put their name forward to run against John Swinney. So therefore, he's the only candidate. Therefore, he is the new leader of the Scottish National Party, the SNP. There was last night, 24 hours ago or so, a potential rival, and they did secure the number of prerequisite backing and support, but they didn't move forward. So it always looked like it would be Mr. Swinney as the only candidate in the race, and indeed that is how it has turned out. So now that that nomination process is closed, now we are hearing from some of the news agencies and the news wires that that is the case, that he has been confirmed as the SNP's new leader. Then we should be due to hear from him, and all the ceremonial functions that will take place later, the official party ones, and of course what that all means for the government there in Holyrood in Scotland with regards to the government there. So John Swinney, I think we can see some pictures of John Swinney just to remind you of what he looks like. He has been a big figure in Scottish politics and in the SNP for a long time. He is a former deputy, and he has also been, well, he's been an SNP member for a long time, but he's also been an MSP for a very long time. He's interim leader when the party was in opposition, and now he is taking over the job. He has insisted that he will lead from a centre-left position. He insisted that he won't be a caretaker leader. He will be there on a permanent basis to get the job done. This was all speaking before it was confirmed, but now it seems it has been confirmed. Let's speak to Anna Gross now, political correspondent at the Financial Times newspaper. Thanks for coming on the programme.
My pleasure.
What do you make of this then?
Well, I mean, it's kind of drawing to a close what has been an incredibly turbulent and perilous period for the SNP party. I think he's got a massive job ahead of him to try to salvage the party. I mean, just to put this in context, we know that the party has suffered massively from the scandal surrounding Nicola Sturgeon, the former leader. And then some quite, I think we can say quite securely that some management problems around under Humza Yousaf. He struggled to kind of unite the party and unite the public under his banner, and then managed to really frustrate the Green Party and trigger calls for a no confidence vote in him. So what John Swinney has to achieve now is two quite huge things. One is rebuild unity in the SNP, and he also needs to ward off a very huge threat posed by Scottish Labour in the forthcoming general election.
And so they're the two challenges he has politically. Tell us a little bit about his political past, his political priorities, his leanings.
So as you mentioned, he's a veteran. He's 60 years old, and he was a former finance minister under the former leader and SNP kind of heavyweight Alex Salmond. He was also leader of the party for a brief spell between 2000 and 2004. So he's got, a lot of political capital behind him. And I think one of the things that's quite interesting about his position compared to some of the other contenders for the role, including Kate Forbes, who's kind of very conservative figure, he has sort of said, look, what I'm presenting and what I will bring is a moderate left of centre policy platform. And that comes after Humza Yousaf managed to frustrate many different wings of Parliament, including the Greens, most notably, which led to the challenge to his leadership and to the SNP, in fact. So what he's saying is, look, I will present a moderate platform, and I will kind of unify the different wings of government and also of the Scottish public. And I think that's really important because the SNP is short of a majority. It has 63 seats compared to 65 for the opposition. So he needs to toe a very careful line and actually very astutely be able to bring all of, at least a large number of politicians with him when it comes to putting forward policies, but also, signing off on all important budgets.
Indeed. Anna Gross, a significant moment for Scotland. Thank you very much for coming on the programme and explaining it to us. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So we'll have plenty more reaction to that news that John Swinney will now lead the SNP, the Scottish National Party. Do stay with us. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. This is BBC News. Bye-bye.